Hi friends, my name is Aubrey Richardson and I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas. I am a therapist. So I specialize in working with other therapists, caregivers, and helping professionals who are wanting to recover from perfectionism, people pleasing, and overachieving. Today we are doing a little question and answer session on perfectionism. So let's get started. Question number 1: how can I let go of the need of everything to be perfect in my work? If you have ever worked with me before or you've ever met me IRL, you know that one of my favorite things to say and one of my favorite quotes is that we normally hear, like, don't half-ass anything, right? Like, put your full ass into one thing. And I am here to tell you, I would actually love for you to practice half-assing everything. Perfect is not real. Perfect is not obtainable. Anything worth doing is worth doing 50%. And so I would really challenge you to practice just hitting that 50%, hitting that half-ass mark. And if you are a perfectionist, I already know your response. You're like, oh, Aubrey, what are you talking about? Like, I cannot not be perfect at work. Like, my work provides money for me, for my family. It provides health insurance, right? Like, I can't not be perfect. I hear you. And all of these things are true. But what I also know to be true is that what you're doing isn't working. So let's try my way. And part of how I approach therapy is, if you are so far over here, we are going to aim for landing on the opposite end of the spectrum. And because you are who you are, and I cannot take away things from you that have worked for you, that are important for you, you're going to end up landing somewhere in the middle. So even though you're like, oh my God, I can't do, I only do 50%. Your 50% is probably everyone else's like 75 to 80%. So you're still going to be okay. I promise you, half-assing things, giving only 50% is still going to get things done because you do a lot, and it would be okay for you to do less. Question number 2. What strategies can I use to feel okay with good enough instead of always striving for perfection? Here's the thing. I don't think you're going to feel okay at first with just practicing good enough. I think it's going to feel uncomfortable. I think you're going to feel icky and yucky on the inside, and there's going to be a lot of restlessness and a lot of distress, and that's okay. Like, we are practicing something different. It's something new for you to have that goal of good enough, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and that is expected. It is part of the process. It's okay to not feel okay with that. Part of practicing good enough is recognizing these feelings and approaching them with non-judgment and respect, and then learning to tolerate that discomfort. 3. How do I manage feelings of guilt or failure when things don't go as planned? My inner perfectionist is like, they will always go as planned. What are you talking about? But we know, unfortunately, shit happens. Life happens. How do I manage feelings of guilt or failure when things don't go as planned? In my head, I'm imagining a scenario like we're planning an event or a vacation and things don't go how we envision them. And so that's what I'm kind of thinking of guilt. And guilt's not bad to feel. You might feel guilty. That's a valid reaction. Guilt just means that something happened that we made a choice that wasn't necessarily aligned with our highest value. It just means we made a mistake. And mistakes happen. Guilt happens. It's a mistake, right? When something doesn't go as planned, it's a mistake. It's not a tragedy. Mistakes can be fixed. The failure piece feels more like shame, though. And shame isn't a mistake. A mistake is I have made a wrong choice. Shame says I am the wrong choice, right? I am wrong. And I would question gently and with compassion what that shame is telling you, where that shame is coming from, and if it's necessarily the most accurate source of information. And this can be a conversation that is really painful, so I'd recommend having it with a therapist or giving yourself the time and space to do that in a safe place. Question number 4. How do I differentiate between high standards and perfectionism? Oof, juicy. Let's get into it. I don't think it's bad to have high standards. In my experience, and I think in the experience of other folks, people rise to the standard that you set. So if you set really low standards, that's where they're going to be. And so having high expectations, high standards, not a bad thing. I think the difference between high standards and perfectionism is in how tied up your sense of self is to the outcome, and how you speak to yourself afterwards. So if I have this high standard that I expect, let's say, excellence in my clinical work, that's okay. I can strive for that excellence, but inevitably when I screw up, right, because I am human, I am not a robot, I think it's perfectionism when I start to say, well, I'm the screw up, I'm the mistake, I should be better at this, right? We start to hear all of these negative beliefs about ourselves that get in the way, right? Things tend to be really global, really stable, persistent in our life. Like, I am unworthy of this. If I am not perfect, then I will not be loved. I am unlovable. Versus a high standard, and let's say we don't make it, we're like, whoops, that was not my best moment. How can I take that experience, learn from it, and fail forwards and fail in a different direction than before? High standards asks, but doesn't demand. And to me, perfectionism demands. Number 5. What small steps can I take to reduce perfectionistic tendencies without feeling overwhelmed? Y'all may not like it, but I want you to start so small, and I want you to start in your own home. Like, if you are someone that feels like you cannot leave the house with a sink full of dishes, I want you to leave the house with a sink full of dishes. If you feel like you cannot step outside of your home without your hair done and your makeup done in the full 9 yards, I want you to practice like not doing one of those things. It's gonna suck. You're not gonna like it. And when you do start to feel uncomfortable, that's a great sign to use your coping skills. Use those things that you know work really well for you, and know that you're not going to be super comfortable. Number 6, how can I maintain professional excellence without burning out from perfectionism? I think this question really ties together a couple of things we've already talked about in this video. I think number 1, we can challenge the idea that things have to be perfect. I think we can practice them being good enough. I think we can practice having high standards without the shame and judgment and blame that can come with perfectionism. I think we can disentangle our sense of self from the outcome. I know as a therapist myself, it can be really so difficult to take yourself out of the equation. That if your client isn't doing well or meeting their goals, it feels like then you're not doing good clinical work. Then like this reflects on you. And same thing in many professions, right? Like if this thing doesn't go well, then it must be because I'm not doing good enough, right? I'm not good enough at my job. And that is simply not true. Who you are and the wonderful things about you have nothing to do with the output, the productivity of your job. Number 7, y'all, I'm obsessed with this question. How do I respond to clients' expectations of me when they align with my perfectionistic tendencies? Whew. If you were my client, we would dig so deep into this. Number 1, I hope you're in therapy. If your therapist is not in therapy, that's a big old red flag, and I will die on that hill. I don't care if it's controversial. I don't care if it's a hot take. I will die on that hill. Your therapist should be in therapy, so that you have a place to process that, to reflect and say, wow, like my perfectionism is really coming to the surface here. Let's dig into that. If I'm in a session and a client is like, well, don't you have your life together? Like, well, you should send, an email immediately. Respond. Like, they expect me to be perfect. I would really reflect that back and be like, interesting. You expect me to be perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm just a person. I make mistakes. And maybe this is a time where I'm having a really human moment and I disappointed you. Can we dig into that disappointment? Can you share that with me? I really want to make sure that I addressed all parts of that question. How do I respond to clients' expectations of me when they align with my perfection tendencies? I think here as well is an area that I feel really comfortable with self-disclosure and saying, like, yeah, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm a recovering people pleaser. And I get that, right? Like, I get wanting to hold that standard of other people, and it's just not realistic. And here's why. And really deeply empathizing and offering compassion for that part of us that wants security and stability and control in a world that is unstable, unpredictable. And we can't do anything about that. Oof, that's a good question. Number 8, what are some tools for coping with the anxiety that comes with imperfection? This is called distress tolerance. When shit does not go your way, when you are feeling all kinds of dysregulated, how do you handle it? Y'all know I don't love talking about coping skills. Your regular coping skills, anything that's going to help you manage those feelings. I'm a big fan of using your senses, hot, cold, texture, smells, to help regulate you. Honestly, you got to sit through it. You got to go through it to get out of it. I wish there was a better answer. I wish there was a magical cure-all. I wish there was a magic pill I could recommend you. But there's not. And sometimes you just have to sit through the suck of the anxiety. Sorry. I know you probably don't love that answer. Number 9, how do I learn to trust others' work when delegating, even if it's not exactly how I would do it? Who says they have to do it exactly like you would do it? They probably don't. They probably won't, because they're not you, and every person is a little bit different. I think there's a difference between tolerating work that is done differently than yours and work that is not up to par. And I think it's up to you to recognize, like, did I communicate those expectations? Did I give this person that I'm delegating to all of the tools and resources that they need, right? That's within reason. Like, if this is someone like at work that you're supposed to delegate to, like someone in your chain or whatever, clearly I'm not a corporate girly, okay? I'm a therapist and I work for myself. There's a difference between work just being done differently and work being done poorly. So I'd really dig into that. Did I communicate clearly? Did I set the expectation? Did I address any questions that this person had? Is this person the right person to do this? And if the answer is yes, like, this is someone who is an adult, who is educated and intelligent and capable of doing these things, then that mistrust is not a them problem, it's a you problem. And the only way to practice trust is by doing it. And sometimes it can feel like I cannot trust. And you can. It is just uncomfortable. It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel secure. And there are some situations where it's really good to practice this, and there are some situations in where it is not safe to practice this. And being clear about that. But there are some workplaces where it's okay to say, like, you know what, I delegated this task to blah, 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 and unfortunately it was not done, up to our standard. And letting that other person own that. And there are other times when that's not safe to say, and that could really jeopardize your job. And so I think you do have to allow other people the opportunity to either step up or fail. And then once you have that once you have that evidence, it's a lot easier to make informed decisions. Number 10. How can I reframe mistakes as growth opportunities rather than failures? Growth opportunities. Wow, what a corporate-y word. Mistakes can feel like failures. And sometimes things do fail. And that's okay. Not everything is going to go perfectly. We're allowed to fail. We're allowed to make mistakes. We're allowed to have opportunities to grow and learn and fail and try again and learn. Mistakes are mistakes because they can be fixed. Mistakes are not tragedies. Tragedies cannot be fixed. So I really encourage you to be aware of the language that you use and the language that you're using to talk to yourself here. And when you say, like this recipe was such a failure, is the recipe a failure? Is it this great tragedy? Or is it a mistake? Is it an opportunity to learn and fail differently? I know, like if I give you a personal example, I have learned to cook and bake in the past 5-ish years. And there is no experience quite as humbling as learning how to cook and bake. Because sometimes that it just burns. It does not turn out right. The texture is wonky. And you're like, what did I do? I don't know what I did wrong. I followed all the instructions. I did all the things. And it still just doesn't turn out right. And it can feel like a failure. Because you put all of this work in, all of this intention and effort, and you really tried, and you still didn't get this like picture perfect outcome. And it can feel like a failure. But just because it feels like one does not mean that it is one. We can always throw it away and order pizza. We can always look at it and go, wow, it ain't pretty, but it'll eat. And noticing that tendency to call it a failure and lovingly and gently challenging that to say, is it a failure or is it just a mistake? And taking that information, right, of like, note to self, you can't do that when cooking, so that next time, hopefully you don't do it again. And if you do, oh well, we're just human and we're learning. Thank y'all so much for watching my video of questions and answers about perfectionism in full transparency and to break this idea about perfectionism. I did each of these questions in unscripted, clearly, with no bullet or talking points. This is just what you hear is what you get. And each video was just filmed by itself. So like I would do question 1, read it out loud, answer, pause, next one. And then I just strung them all together. I hope that some of this information has been helpful to you, or that hearing about the process of making these videos and it being more transparent is helpful to you. Perfectionism is not a requirement to exist in this world. It is not a requirement to have love, have acceptance. And I hope that some of this was helpful. If you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to me at Aubrey@sageholisticcounseling.com, or you can contact me through my form at sageholisticcounseling.com/contact. Like, subscribe, get on my calendar, and I'll see you soon.